Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's the Historical Gamer here, looking at the brand new Scourge of War Chancellorsville. Just came out yesterday, and this is a video I'm going to be doing. It's not quite as formal. I'm kind of playing through it while I'm also going to be talking about it, so it's going to be a little bit more informal than my other videos, which admittedly tend to be somewhat informal as well. In this video I'm going to be looking at, as I said, Scourge of War Chancellorsville. It is the third expansion of the Scourge of War game Gettysburg. However, this is also a standalone game, so if you don't yet have Gettysburg or don't really want to jump in and grab Gettysburg, but you'd rather get Chancellorsville because it's newer, you can feel free to do that. There are some pretty nice additions here. The game does consist of what I'm showing here is 20 scenarios. The press release actually says it's 22, but I only show 20 in this, so maybe that was a typo in the press release by Matrix Games. You can get the game at matrixgames.com. As you see, it builds right into Scourge of War Gettysburg, so if you already have the game, it's what's called a smart install, so it'll actually recognize you've already got Gettysburg installed and only install the files you need to run it. If you don't have Gettysburg, as I said, it will install a full install so you can play Chancellorsville. I don't know if I've ever played a game like that before, but that's interesting. It also comes with 4 tutorials, so if you don't have the other game or you're not familiar with the previous games, it'll do a good job of walking you through. Also, it has some sandbox modes in here, so it does have a lot of replayability as far as that's concerned. There are 3 new maps, including 2 Chancellorsville maps and also a Fredericksburg map, which is interesting because if they ever decide to add the Battle of Fredericksburg, then obviously they've got it covered. That's because the second Battle of Fredericksburg was fought alongside with the Battle of Chancellorsville in May of 1863. But let's get going. I'm going to be looking at one of the scenarios which deals with the command of a division during the second Battle of Fredericksburg. The main Battle of Chancellorsville was fought just a couple of miles to the south, I believe. Fredericksburg was a town along the Rappahannock River. The Union Army had, and by the way, there's some pretty nice box art and design art, as you can see there, some new stuff. Actually, I'll get back into the briefing of the battle in a moment. Here we've got, that's the Rappahannock River. There's a bridge over it. That's a pontoon bridge. Water is actually a pretty big addition to the game. They've had water simulated in the past, but no water graphics, so there you see is a water graphic, obviously, for the river. Here are my orders. I need to attack the Confederates on Mary's Heights, which is where the main action of the first Battle of Fredericksburg was also fought. As we see here, we've got some supply wagons crossing the river, so obviously the bridge is functional. It's not just a item to look at, as you see off there in the distance, and we'll kind of look at some of the artillery we've got on the opposite end of the river. We've got breastworks, which are another new feature there. As you see, there's some breastworks for the guns. I'm not quite sure how they affect line of sight. I don't really find out in this scenario, I don't believe. And there's the town of Fredericksburg on the other end of the river. The town is somewhat burned out and bombed out. That's a nice little inclusion there, because back in 1862, just a couple of months before this battle took place in December, the Union was attacking Fredericksburg, and to get across the river, they had to do so under fire. The Confederates launched sniper fire and some artillery as the Union attempted to cross, so the Union artillery launched counter battery and counter infantry fire to support, which started several homes along the river on fire and did significant damage to the town. And thus that is modeled here. Okay. Got some brigades moving up on the left there. As I was saying, the second Battle of Fredericksburg was fought around the same time, basically the same time as the Battle of Chancellorsville. In 1863, General Hooker took command of the Union Army of the Potomac, replacing General Burnside, who, as I said, well, I didn't mention Burnside's, but the first Battle of Fredericksburg, Burnside was in command and launched futile attack after futile attack against Mary's Heights. The Union lost about 12,000 men. I'm not quite sure why the river ends there, by the way, but the Union lost about 12,000 men to the Confederate 5,000. It was really one of the most futile attacks of the war. Pickett's charge would be similar so, and I would say Cold Harbor was another battle that saw another fruitless assault on a well-fortified position. But this is the Battle of Second Fredericksburg, so this is now May of 1863. General Hooker's been in command for, maybe about a month now. When he first took command, Hooker was a very aggressive and very confident commander, very much in contrast to the always doubtful General Burnside's. Hooker launched a relatively ambitious campaign in 1863. He outflanked General Lee, moved north of, oh goodness, my directions are all turned around. He moved west of Lee's army, crossing the Rappahannock upriver, and outflanked Lee, caught him totally by surprise when a good portion of his army was actually in North Carolina and Southern Virginia under General Longstreet, foraging and fighting a campaign against some Union coastal forces there. And so General Lee was outnumbered here much more than he normally was historically at Chancellorsville. Now, the Union Army, as a diversion, left one corps of their force at Fredericksburg under General Sedgwick. So this scenario actually represents the attack that the Union launched against Fredericksburg. The intent was to outflank General Lee, turn his flank because he was just a few miles down the road from Fredericksburg. If the Union got a significant force here, General Lee would be caught between two forces and would have to withdraw. Already Hooker had, like I said, took Lee completely by surprise and had basically put him in a very precarious position where Lee was massively outnumbered, and now if Fredericksburg if the Confederate forces at Fredericksburg could be pushed back, Lee would be in an even more precarious position. So this represents that attack by the Union Corps at Fredericksburg. Historically, it was successful. The Confederates really didn't have the manpower to resist it, and we'll see if history plays out here. I am playing the role of the 3rd Division in the 6th Corps. There's Alexander Shaler, commands my largest brigade, about 1,700 men. My 2nd Brigade has about 900 men. I am General John Newton. My force is relatively inexperienced. Oh, goodness. One thing about commands is it's easy to get them botched up and then send units just streaming off the road like this. This is going to be a mess to get cleaned up. It's about a 30-minute scenario in real time. Why are they doing that? I just wanted to tell my guy to take the roads. They want to tell all of them to get off the roads. Commanding divisions in real life was a nightmare, to be honest, or even brigades. When you've got thousands upon thousands of men streamed out in long lines along narrow roads, often with vegetation, or in this case buildings along the other side, it could be a disaster or a nightmare. It could take hours to get a corps, or a division into the field and ready to fight. This little mix-up here of mine is definitely slowing me down and kind of representing that historical difficulty. But one thing that's different in this game as opposed to real life is troops can march straight through buildings. It does slow them down significantly, but they don't have to go around the buildings, apparently. Let's just see if we can get these guys in a line over here. But as I was saying, General Hooker had put Lee in a very precarious position, and Lee took what was probably the biggest gamble of his career and ordered General Jackson to take his corps and essentially march around the Union Army and hit them in the flank, which was exposed. They had set up a defensive position, either inviting Lee to attack or flee, and Lee, that decision by Hooker went from, instead of Hooker holding the momentum by surprising Lee, now Hooker sat back and let Lee react. Lee reacted by sending Jackson around Hooker's flank, and he launched a devastating flank attack into the Union flank. know why they're just sitting there. Huh. Meanwhile, my division is just a mess. The devastating flank attack was probably Lee's greatest victory. He was outnumbered more than 2-1 and nearly routed the Union Army from the field. Goodness, what a mess. But it did cost Lee one of his senior lieutenants. General Stonewall Jackson was wounded in the confusion. The attack was launched later in the day, so that as the first attacks were starting to lose steam, Jackson was scouting out the lines, trying to relaunch his men into another attack, and was misidentified and fired on by his own men. He was wounded, his arm would be amputated, and then he would get pneumonia and die of that shortly thereafter. He was, without a doubt, one of Lee's most valuable lieutenants. Most people regard him as Lee's best lieutenant. There is a small group of people who regard General Longstreet as somewhat of a different equal, I would say. It's a pretty small crowd that would say that, but Longstreet was another very capable corps commander. Next to Jackson, he was, without a doubt, probably the second best corps commander in the Confederacy, maybe the second or third best in the entire war. Hancock on the Union side is certainly up there as one of the best Union Corps commanders. Some other good ones are out west. Patrick Cleburne may have been as good, but he never rose above the rank of divisional command for political reasons. Goodness, it's taking forever to get these men into line. And just imagine if it was in real life and you couldn't march through other units. The game does a better job than it used to of modeling troops moving through other troops, and it does slow them down and fatigue them pretty significantly. But if there were a more realistic modeling of how troops move, you know, obviously some of those would just be having to sit off on the side, and it would take even longer to get into position. Thankfully, it does not have quite that historical penalty. It's hard enough commanding units. I am using the courier method of communication, so I have unlimited zoom out on, so I'm not tied to my saddle like a real general would be, but I do issue orders via courier, so if I want to tell a brigade to do something, I've got to send a horse with a message. And that is this game's biggest strength, is the command system. I think it is best suited to a divisional level command, which, you know, matches kind of why the scenario breakdown in this release is what it is. But I personally think the very unique command structure that features this game, where you send orders via courier, which is all, you know, simulated. It's basically you click on a brigade, you click where you want it to go, click the formation, and then a courier will go off with those orders. You don't have to write up orders, although you can. But I do think that that's the biggest strength, as you see there, the couriers going to the various regiments with their orders. I do think that is the biggest strength of this game. Pardon my yawning. I'll get them moving into the double quick here to get them up into position quicker. Taking long enough to get them just marching around doing nothing. They did improve the graphics as far as the terrain, it would seem, quite a bit. The trees look a lot better, in my opinion, in this version of the game than they did in previous ones, although there weren't a whole lot of trees in Antietam, and Antietam, in my opinion, was a big step up graphically over Gettysburg. Man, am I inefficient. Like I said, this is my first experience with this new game, so with as poorly a job as I'm doing getting these men into position, I will not be surprised if I lose this battle. I still don't know why that division or brigade or whatever it is over off to the left isn't attacking. I could send a courier to ask them to, but I don't know, maybe I will do that. I need to get my men into position first, though. There aren't a whole lot of Confederates to my front. Looks like there's a couple of batteries of artillery. There's one regiment there in skirmish formation right there in front of me. As you can see there, the Confederates have some breastworks behind the stone walls. This stone wall that we're now attacking is the place where the Union attacks in 1862 were thrown back. I don't know if you really get a sense of this being a heights, but we are attacking uphill. From my current angle, you probably can't tell that, but it is a rather uphill climb through relatively open terrain in front of a stone wall. Like I said, these are where the futile attacks of 1862 were launched. Now the Confederates only have a skirmish line in place here, so it shouldn't be too costly to push them back. Where my men are in neat, tight, packed ranks with firing, walls of lead out, the enemy is stretched out, often several feet between them. So the volume of fire that my men face is not nearly as difficult to deal with as it would be if we were talking about an enemy in line. Of course, skirmish allows you to cover a much larger swath of ground with a smaller force, but its principal value would be to screen your forces, keep what you're doing behind them hidden from the enemy because you occupy a advanced line. Not sure how exactly well that plays out in this game because I don't usually play with Fog of War on, or if I do, I haven't really noticed. But as you see there, they've got one, maybe two regiments stretched out, and I've got 4 in line that are covering, the same amount of ground. Where's that regiment off to the left going? Rebels are charging that regiment of mine, which seems a pretty foolish thing to do, given the fact that I've got neatly packed ranks of men, and they're very spread out. One guy running on maybe a wall of 20. And as expected, they are thrown back and retreating. Well, that's a good start, although admittedly I am attacking a bit off to the left or to the right of where I should be. You see my objective point is up there to the left. And I have no idea why Colonel Brown's brigade is not advancing. I've given them several orders to advance. I may have to take command of them. Looking around here. So far so good, pushing the enemy back a bit. Still not attacking over there on the left. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. Alright, let's go ahead. I don't want to post this is going to be about a 34-minute video. I don't want to post the whole video as one piece. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this part off here, and then we'll rejoin with the second half of the video and see the result of the battle here. And we'll have some more commentary associated with that. So go ahead and check out part 2. Thanks for watching so far. The rest will be resolved in part 2 with I guess the real intense part of the battle, because so far it's been pretty light, just a couple of regiments skirmishing. So check out part 2, and thanks for watching.